bacterial growth in the water, which doesn't sound that dangerous, but that would cause diarrhea and other gastrointestinal problems, which can be fatal. So that's poisoning of a type. Finished water storage, again, water tanks. This is an old tank that we had in my town before we repainted it. The high school, it was behind the high school, and the high school kids wrote a derogatory term about the principal up there in 1965. So they, that's the racing stripe, as we called it for decades. Now, a lot of water systems have single points of failure, is what a lot of the studies say. And from 1965, when this was built, to 2000, that was the only water tank in the town. And it was such a single point, such a problem that we couldn't clean it, because when you take down the water tank, you have no place to store water, and it affects the pressure and everything in the town. So it wasn't until we built the second tank that we were able to actually clean out the tank, which is a indication of the noise that we have in water supply. Terrorists would have to do quite a bit to get over the noise where, pipes break, water gets dirty, water tanks, get contaminated with bacteria. There's a lot going on that we don't need terrorists to have problems with water tanks, for example. Woburn, Mass., which has a history of, again, wells being contaminated, if you in the movie Civil Action, you all probably heard about. 2 years ago, they'd have boil water order because one of their tanks got polluted with bird shit because they had allowed the top of the tank to be corroded, and the birds would perch on it and defecate into the water. And they didn't find that out until it was too late, and they had to boil water order. Then they had to take that tank out. They had more than one tank, fortunately, and then drain it, clean it, fix the top, put it back in service. So there's a lot going on in water systems without terrorists, getting in the way. Yes?
So were those birds considered terrorists?
No. They were never identified either. And so the level of the water in the tank is very important, and here's our readout from our SCADA screen for the water tank level, for example. Now the water distribution system. Now to boil the talk all down, this is the most vulnerable part of the system. In all the studies and research since 9/11 and before, when people looking at this question, the bottom line is the most vulnerable part are the pipes and the fire hydrants, because it's after treatment. In most cases, there's no monitoring of the pipes or the water in the pipes. There are federal regulations for monitoring certain areas of the pipes for bacteria, chlorine residual, and then 4 times a year for trialomethanes and hyaluronic acids, which are formed by the interaction of chlorine and solid matter in the water. But the most likely attack that would cause human casualties from all the studies that I've seen and from the experts is putting water in through a hydrant. And it's usually a targeted attack, because there were studies showing that if you did it within a half mile of, say, a targeted building, that you'd get a high concentration in 9 minutes. I don't know the details of that, but it's a possibility. You could put water in a hydrant with the intention of contaminating all the water in the distribution system, and it might work, except that, again, the noise, the things that always go wrong. It's been a constant problem in my system where valves. In intersections, you have valves, and you should have valves in all the hydrants. And in most cases, the valves are decades old. They haven't been exercised. No one knows if they work. And in most cases, they might be broken closed. So it's very hard, even for the water operators, to know what are the hydraulics of the system. So an attacker from outside is not really going to know that. So if you're reliably trying to poison a community by putting water even in the distribution system, it's a good chance it'll work. But again, you've got dilution to worry about, and you don't really know where the water's going to go. So the most likely scenario is that there could be a targeted attack by either pumping water from one building into the system and at least with some assurance that it's going in a certain direction to another building that's your target, or in a hydrant. Now, there's 1.8 million miles of water pipes in the U.S. That's an estimate. No one really knows for sure. There are between 6 and 12 million fire hydrants. No one seems to know. I checked with the National Association of Fire Hydrants, or whatever it was called, and Fire Protection Association, et cetera, emails and checking their websites. And I dug down with one analyst, and he said, well, no one knows. No one's counting it. The point is, there's a lot of fire hydrants. And even in one community, the rule is supposed to have, you're supposed to have one every 1,000 feet, which could be, that isn't usually always followed. But in a city, there's going to be hundreds. In a small town, there's going to be dozens. So there's a large potential for those to be used as vectors for contamination. Now, some communities have put in locks on the hydrants, which of course is a practical issue with, fighting a fire. So it's one more thing for the firemen to do when they're racing up to put the fire out. So I personally would balance that against the very remote chance of the fire hydrant being used as a vector and not do that. The other option is that there are backflow preventers. I'm not sure the term, a check valve that you can put in it that prevents you from putting anything into the hydrant. But again, that's a major cost, and the national cost for even 6 million hydrants could be quite high. So there is a countermeasure, but the best countermeasure is one that's been recommended by a number of studies, which is unlikely to be done nationwide because of the cost, and until something really bad happens, is having constant water monitoring. There's technology now for 24/7 monitoring of the quality of the water in the system. Of course, you only test for what you're looking for. So you'd have to have a short list of things that you'd be expecting would be the likely contaminant, and they could get you with something that isn't. But you could look at classes of chemicals. You could look at markers. So it's better than what we have now, where we really have no idea. Now, I was talking about the noise in the system, and honestly, if you're running a water department, terrorism is not the first thing you're worrying about. And the only time you do anything is when someone tells you to do it. Again, you get water main breaks. Not all the time, but fairly often. Discolored water because of the buildup of sediment in the pipes, or a treatment plant breakdown, or the tank hasn't been cleaned in a while. You got to deal with unpaid water bills, aging infrastructure. It's a national issue. The water infrastructure gets a D- from a national association for the poor condition of the water pipes, the water treatment plants, the entire water infrastructure in the country. It's in some cases 100 years old in my part of the country, the East, and a lot of things are still original equipment. Maintenance, new regulations create costs and require work. Vandalism is probably more of a issue than terrorism, of course, and getting more money to do all these things. So we only did something in my town when after 9/11. I mean, we talked about it, but we waited till we were told what are the 10 things you're supposed to do, and I'll get to that. But it's tough justifying spending money for things like this unless you have an actual event or threat or direction from a government entity. Now let's talk about SCADA. We changed to SCADA a few years ago from the old control center here, electromechanical controls, Allen Bradley, PLCs. You saw in the earlier slide the SCADA screen for the level of water in the tank. On this one, it's a pen recorder here that we have to check every day. Now this is semi-automatic. But what happens is when the operator comes in the morning, and in our plant we didn't run 24/7. We didn't really need to. Most places do. So we only had it manned when we were operating it, which is maybe 8 to 12 hours a day. So they'd come in and they'd set the speed of the water coming in, and that would then they'd have a formula, and they'd set the chlorine injection and what the concentration of the other chemicals should be. So it was a lot of hands-on stuff, which meant they were paying attention. And it's a small plant, so they could walk around and check everything. Now we went to a SCADA system where we've got a very nice self-explanatory HMI, human human-machine interface. That's like pushing. So instead of pushing the buttons up here, you see it all here, but then you only have to set it once, and then everything else happens automatically. And it's an Ethernet connection throughout the plant, but it builds upon the old relays and PLCs in the system through an old relay box. So the water commissioners liked it because we got more control over the quality of the water. We were able to have better assurance that it was being operated properly, and we got reports on what happened. The bad news is that no one was thinking about, what exposure does this give us? And we have remote facilities. We have a well field. We have the 2 tanks. We have the dam. We have a dam, and those are all connected electronically, either radio or cellular or cable. We get all of the above, or Ethernet to the plant. So that's a big problem. So studies show the McAfee did a study called "In the Crossfire" that came out recently, that they surveyed a number of SCADA people with SCADA, not just water, throughout the country, and 76% said they were connected to an IP network or the internet. So there's an exposure there, and 47% realized that created a security issue. Surprise. Team Simru, a security research firm, produced this heat map. They in their darknet project, they scanned for receiving scans for SCADA ports, and they found a lot of activity. And that's a good question. Who's scanning our SCADA ports and why? We don't know. There were testbed studies by various researchers that show that external contactors can penetrate systems, like most of us here would know. And I mentioned the power grid issue. Okay. So RISI, which I mentioned earlier, the Repository of Industrial Security Incidents, is showing a general trend of increase in incidents, which again are not all intentional, but it's instructive that they're increasing. And that's where we got the 367% increase for water. Again, the numbers are pretty small. 22% were targeted attacks, the rest are mostly malware. There's been debatable stories, but some confirmation that there's been cyber attacks that shut down power systems outside the U.S., and also reports that the U.S. electric grid has been repeatedly penetrated. Now, you probably heard about StuckNet. It just came out July 12th, I believe, and there's been a lot of news on it. I did some research. This seems to be the first malware that targeted a SCADA system. Since most SCADA systems are on Windows, XP for the most part is advertised by this vendor as being a robust platform for running the SCADA system, and that's what we use in my plant. But it was particularly targeted for Siemens, Symantec, WinCC, and PCS7 SCADA software, which is used in a wide variety of of applications, but also water. The American Water Works Association put out a bulletin a few days ago alerting their members to this and telling them whatever they knew at the time about what to do. Microsoft has a patch which doesn't seem to be doing too much, but there's Siemens has SysClean, and I believe Trend Micro has one as well. In the first guesses were that it was industrial espionage, but then some analysts are saying it could also be used to control the systems, give the malware attacker the same administrative rights as the user of the system. So looks like the toothpaste is out of the tube. I mean, there could be copycats for the other SCADA manufacturers. There could be this could be the beginning of a bad trend of SCADA-specific software. Now, there are studies on the potential impacts of a cyber attack in a public water system SCADA. I won't read through the whole list, but it's not out of the question if you can get into the SCADA system through the Windows platform or Linux or anything else that you can interfere with the operations and cause changes. It's not that easy. As you'll notice in all my examples earlier, I couldn't come up with an actual terrorist or other attack that actually did that, but the Siemens StuckNet